Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving deep into Europe at the start of the 20th century. A time of, well, empires, growing yeah, and a whole lot of tension, right? Like just bubbling under the
A
surface.
powder keg, really,
Yeah,
waiting for a spark.
exactly. And you, our listeners, wanted to know more about the naval race between Germany and Great Britain, specifically why these two nations were obsessed with like just building bigger and better battleships, right? And how did all this contest, I guess, for naval supremacy, how did it help pave the road to World War One? So to guide us through this fascinating but complex period, we've got an expert joining us.
Glad to be here. It's
Yeah.
it's a period that never ceases to fascinate,
Yeah.
even over a century later.
So before we delve into the specifics, right, of the race itself, can you set the scene a little bit? Like, why was naval power so important back then?
In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, I mean, it seems like it was more than just military might. Oh, absolutely. You got to remember, for a nation like Great Britain, with its vast empire and all those global trade routes, sea power, naval power, it was essential. It was their lifeblood, really. It wasn't just about force projection. It was about making sure those goods and resources could flow freely, keeping those communication lines open, and maybe most importantly, projecting power and prestige on the world stage, right?
Right. Yeah, it was like the ultimate status symbol, like, hey, we're here, we're powerful, and we're not going anywhere.
Exactly. And for the Brits, this wasn't just pride. It was about survival. They even had this naval doctrine, the what they call the two-power standard, meaning their navy had to be stronger than the next two biggest navies, like combined. Think about that.
Wow, that's a statement, all right. It's like they were daring anyone to challenge them.
In a way, they were. And for a long time, no one really did. Britain ruled the waves, and that was that. It was the accepted order. But then Germany enters the picture. Newly unified, ambitious new emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm II. He had big plans, and I guess you could say, bit of a chip on his shoulder.
Okay, so Wilhelm,
Yeah.
he was Queen Victoria's grandson, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like he maybe had a bit of a complicated relationship with Britain.
Yeah, yeah. Willem, he admired British power, their technology,
Hmm.
but he also resented their dominance. He saw Germany as this rising power destined to challenge the old guard, and he believes a strong navy was essential to achieving that goal.
So he decided to go head to head with the reigning champ of the seas. That seems pretty audacious.
It was, and to bring his vision to life, Wilhelm turned to a brilliant, ambitious strategist, Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz.
Ah, Tirpitz, the man who basically started the naval arms race. Tell us a bit more about him. What was his role in all this?
Tirpitz, he was a master planner, a real shrewd political operator too.
Mhm.
He knew Germany couldn't just match Britain ship for ship. They had to be, well, smarter, more innovative. So he pushed through these navy laws that dramatically ramped up German shipbuilding, and he focused on this new class of battleships, the kind that could actually challenge Britain's technological edge.
So it wasn't just about quantity, right? It was about quality, building better ships.
Precisely.
Hmm.
Tirpitz's new technology was the key to catching up. And in 1906, well, the British themselves, they sort of gave him the perfect opportunity to do just that.
Wait, are you talking about the HMS Dreadnought?
Yeah, the Dreadnought. It was a revolutionary ship, like nothing the world had ever seen. It was faster, more heavily armed, better protected than anything else afloat, a technological marvel that, basically made every other battleship obsolete overnight.
I can only imagine the shockwaves that sent through the naval world. It's like, I don't know, like someone unveiling a stealth bomber in the middle of World War One or something.
It was a game changer for sure. And while everyone saw the Dreadnought as this symbol of British dominance, it actually played right into Tirpitz's hands.
How so? I mean, wouldn't Britain be thrilled to have this advantage?
Oh, they were, but
Yeah.
they also, they unintentionally created this new standard that everyone else had to scramble to meet. Germany, especially, they saw the Dreadnought as a chance to leapfrog ahead. The old rules didn't apply anymore. It's
Yeah.
like everyone was starting from scratch.
So this is where the arms race really takes off, right? Both sides pouring resources into these incredibly expensive dreadnoughts, just trying to outdo each other.
Exactly. The Dreadnought didn't just change naval warfare; it changed the entire dynamic between Britain and Germany. It fueled this sense of competition, suspicion, and ultimately fear. Which, well, it would have some pretty big consequences for both countries and for the world. But we'll dive into those consequences in our next segment.
It's amazing to think, right, that this naval race, this wasn't just some military pissing contest, you know? It really forced both these countries to make tough choices about their economies, and it really, like, pushed Europe closer to war. We left off with the launch of the HMS Dreadnought, this technological marvel that it forced everyone to rethink, naval warfare. But how did this race for naval supremacy, how did it actually contribute to the start of World War One?
Well, it's key to remember that this naval race didn't just happen out of nowhere, right? It was happening while all this nationalism was on the rise, imperial ambitions, all these alliances. It was a complicated web, and it was already putting a strain on relations, between the great powers of Europe. And this naval race, well, with all its emphasis on military strength, it was like pouring fuel on a fire.
Like they were building these massive battleships, but also building up mistrust at the same time.
Exactly. They created this atmosphere of, well, suspicion, fear.
Mm.
Every action was seen as a threat, Like, let's say Britain launches a new dreadnought. Germany sees that as a direct threat to their security, and they got to respond. And it just creates this vicious cycle that's hard to break.
I'm curious about something you mentioned. You mentioned how the naval race made existing tensions worse, right? Like, what about the Moroccan crises, the ones in 1905 and 1911? Were those real turning points, or was there more going on?
Those Moroccan crises, yeah, those are perfect examples of how the naval race just kind of poisoned the well, diplomatically speaking. See, both times, Germany tried to flex its muscle in Morocco, right? Challenging France, which had interests there. And of course, that triggered a big reaction from Britain, who saw any German presence in Morocco as a threat to their control of the Mediterranean.
Right, because the Mediterranean was this crucial link for Britain, right, for their empire, connected them to India and the East.
Exactly. Any disruption to British naval dominance there, well, it would have been really bad for their empire. So when Germany made its move in Morocco-Britain, they pushed back hard, backed up France, and it really widened that rift between them and Germany.
So a regional dispute, something that maybe could have been solved, through diplomacy, it turned into a major international crisis, all because of this underlying tension from the naval race.
Yeah, you could say that. And this same pattern, you see it pop up again in the Balkans, for example, another region that was, well, a tinderbox.
Mhm.
All those ethnic tensions, imperial ambitions clashing.
The Balkans were like a powder keg waiting to go off, right? With Austria-Hungary and Russia both wanting to control that region.
Exactly. And the naval race, while it wasn't, directly involved in those Balkan conflicts, it still made things worse. Germany, they were feeling isolated, right, with Britain dominating the seas. So they got closer to Austria-Hungary, which just pushed Russia away even more. It solidified these opposing blocs in Europe.
So the naval race was playing out on a continental scale. Germany and Austria-Hungary on one side, Britain, France, and Russia on the other.
Yeah, you could put it that way. These alliances, the naval race, all that mistrust, it created this rigid system where war became, well, more likely. It meant any little conflict could drag in, all the major powers.
And then June 1914, the unthinkable happens. Archduke Franz Ferdinand from Austria-Hungary, he's assassinated in Sarajevo. It's almost too much of a coincidence that this event, the thing that sparked the war, happened in such a volatile place.
It was a tragedy waiting to happen, yeah.
Yeah.
And as we know, Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, they gave Serbia an ultimatum demanding, well, harsh concessions. And when Serbia didn't meet all the demands, Austria-Hungary declared war. And that set off this chain reaction that quickly pulled all of Europe into war.
And because of these alliances, everyone was obligated to get involved.
Right. Germany, worried about fighting a war on two fronts. They attacked France first, violated Belgian neutrality along the way, and that's what brought Britain into the war. They had a treaty to defend Belgium. Just like that, in a few weeks, the whole continent was a war that would claim millions of lives.
So the war begins, and Germany's fleet, despite all their efforts, they're still no match for the Royal Navy. How did this naval race play out once the fighting started?
Well, Britain's navy, they were dominant. It was decisive, really. Even though that that big clash of battleships, the one everyone thought would happen, it never really did. Britain was able to blockade Germany, cut off all those vital supplies, and really hurt their ability to fight the war. The German High Seas Fleet, they were powerful, but they were stuck in port. They couldn't break through the British blockade.
So the naval race, after all those years, it ended with a whimper, not a bang.
In a way, yeah. There was one big fight, the Battle of Jutland in 1916, but it was kind of a draw. Both sides said they won, but strategically, it was clear Britain was still in control of the North Sea. The German fleet, they knew they couldn't break the blockade, so they mostly stayed in port for the rest of the war.
What a strange ending to this rivalry. All that buildup, all that tension, and the naval battle that everyone expected. It never happened.
It's funny, isn't it? It rarely goes according to plan. The naval race, it definitely set the stage. It created all this fear and suspicion, made war more likely. But the war itself, well, it took on a life of its own. It became this brutal, devastating conflict that, well, it changed the world.
It's wild to think this whole naval race, it started with like so much ambition, right? But it basically ended up as this footnote in the tragedy of World War I. Even though those epic battles everyone thought would happen, those never really materialized. But the race itself still had a huge impact, right? On history. What do you think?
Absolutely. It's sobering, The very things they thought would keep him safe, all those alliances, the military buildup, the naval race, it all contributed to their downfall in a way. But it also shows, how these things that seem, well, isolated, like building ships or storing up nationalism, those can have these huge unintended consequences that just ripple through history. The naval race, I mean, yeah, it might not have been the only cause of World War I, but it definitely it set the stage.
Right, right. Okay, so the war's over, the dust settles. What's left? What are the lasting legacies? How did this naval race shape the 20th century and beyond? What should our listener take away from all this?
Well, the naval race, it had a big impact on history in several ways. First, it really pushed naval technology forward, led to the dreadnought era, and a whole new way of thinking about fighting at sea.
So even though the big showdown never happened, the race itself, it drove innovation. I guess that makes sense, right? Competition usually leads to progress.
Exactly. It pushed everyone to come up with better ship designs, new weapons, new tactics, and all those innovations. They had implications for future wars, shaped naval warfare for decades.
Yeah.
Like the dreadnought, that became the model for battleships for the next 30 years.
That's incredible. These ships built out of fear and rivalry, they ended up influencing how wars were fought at sea for generations.
And the impact wasn't just, ships and technology. The war, it shattered empires, changed borders, and it brought about a new world order, really. Like the United States, they came out of the war as a major naval power, challenging Britain's dominance.
So the naval race, it kind of planted the seeds for a new world, where the old empires were fading away and new powers were rising. It's amazing how these events, they have these ripple effects.
Exactly, and the lessons of the naval race, the dangers of militarism, the fact that alliances can be, well, fragile, the unintended consequences of new technology. Those are all still relevant today. We can see echoes of this period in our own time.
It's I never realized how much the dreadnought, how much it really changed everything. It's like someone just invented a whole new way to fight wars on the ocean, and the world was never the same. Makes you wonder, what if Germany and Britain had figured things out peacefully? What would the world be like?
That's a question historians are still debating, But one thing's for sure, the naval race, it was this key chapter in world history. It gives us valuable insights into how international relations work, even today.
This deep dive, it's been a real eye-opener for me, and hopefully for you listening, too. We've looked at the ambition, the technology, the people, and the tragic consequences of this naval race. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to think about. Look at the world today. We've got all these new technologies, right? Artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, space exploration. Are we watching a new kind of arms race unfold
Mhm.
right in front of us? What do you think? Are there parallels between the naval race and the rivalries we see today? What can we learn from this period in history, to help us deal with the challenges of the 21st century?
That's a uh, that's a great question, and one we should really think about. Just like the dreadnought changed naval warfare back then, these new technologies, they could totally reshape the balance of power in the 21st century. It's really important that we learn from the mistakes of the past, find ways to handle these advancements responsibly.
That's a powerful thought to end on. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And to you, our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the naval race that fueled a world war. Hope you learned some new things, and maybe even have a new appreciation for how complex history really is. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and until next time, keep diving deep.